Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the second webinar conducted by ASEAN Centre for Energy this year in 2018. And so, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the second webinar conducted by ASEAN Centre for Energy, or ACE, this year in 2018. And today we're going to deep dive about aiming zero darkness before 2030 in ASEAN. And first, let me introduce myself. So my name is Melati Wulandari, and I am a technical officer of ASEAN German Energy Program here at ACE. And I will be moderating today's webinar for the next hour or so. So as a brief introduction, I would like to inform you about ASEAN Center for Energy as an organization. This is a brief introduction for ACE. So as an organization, we serve this region, Southeast Asia, in three roles. First, as a think tank, we identify and service innovative solutions. And we also serve as energy data and knowledge hub, which provide a knowledge depository for AMS. And as a catalyst, you also unify and strengthen ASEAN energy. And in these three roles, we serve our roles into products and our deliverables in research, publication, trainings, and capacity building, workshops, and one of the form is through this webinar session. And as a brief introduction, I would like to inform you that this webinar is a monthly event which conducted by ACE, usually from 2 to 3 p.m. Jakarta time with various topics on energy. And our first webinar was actually held on 23rd of February. And it discussed about the key energy trends for ASEAN in 2018. And for those who have missed it, the recordings are available to be viewed on YouTube. And this year's second webinar with focus on aiming zero darkness before 2030 in ASEAN is targeting to reach audiences from different energy stakeholders such as regulators, policymakers, researchers, academia, private sectors, and other energy enthusiasts within and outside the region. And this series of webinar is conducted with the expectation, among others, which is to encourage discussion on energy sectors and also to intensify the information exchange among the energy key players and also to provide a platform for multi-stakeholders discussion. And so here's the agenda for today. So after this introduction, we will start with a presentation on the status of the electrification and off-grid in ASEAN from our speaker, which will be then followed by a presentation from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Indonesia, and a case of study of Myanmar from Spectrum. And before the discussion session, we also have a panelist from GIZ Energy Program Indonesia, that will deliver her 1 or 2 words from the executing agency point of view. And finally, the webinar will be closed with few recaps and summaries around 3 p.m. or so. And so our today's speakers and panelists come from different background and expertise. First, we have Mr. Alessius Damar Pranadi, a technical officer for policy research and analytics here at ACE. He obtained his bachelor degree from Universitas Gadjah Mada and currently pursuing a master degree at Energy and Power Management in Universitas Indonesia. And he has also been involved in many energy studies and publications during his time in ACE. And our second speaker is the Director of Electricity Program Development in Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia, Mr. Alihuddin Sitompul, with his over than 25 years experiences in the power sector. And holding a Master of Management from Krishna Dwipayana University, Mr. Alihuddin is currently serving as the alternate senior officials on Energy Leader of Indonesia. And our third speaker is the founder and director of Spectrum, Mr. David Allen. And Spectrum is a sustainable development knowledge network in Myanmar with focus on policy and private change on resources, rights, and economic justice. They recently conducted a case study on women and electrification in Myanmar. And last but not least, we also have a panelist, Ms. Atik Puspa Fadilah, which is the advisor of Energizing Development NDEF Indonesia, and NDEF is one of the activity from GIZ Energy Program, as the executing agency who helps the government of Indonesia in tackling the challenges of electrifying the nation. And without further ado, let's start our first presentation. So, Mr. Damar, the time is yours.
Hello, check. Hello, check.
Yes, Mr. Damar, we can hear you.
Yes.
You can begin with.
I could hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry for the connection problems. Thank you for your kind introduction, Ms. Melati. Thank you for your kind opportunities to present this presentation. Very good morning and very good afternoon and very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar series. I'm Damar, a technical officer from Policy Research and Analytics Program in ASEAN Center for Energy. And today I'm very glad to be here to present my presentation about the rural electrification and off-grid status in ASEAN. So in the next 10 minutes, I would like to present about the status of the off-grid and rural electrification. And here is my outline. So I would like to start this presentation by introducing you with the status of the rural electrification and also the target in ASEAN countries. And also we have some continuation about the rural electrification demand and also what are the options for the electrification in ASEAN, especially for the rural electrification. And then I would like to continue because of the ASEAN member states already established some off-grid as the option in the rural electrification. I would like to highlight the off-grid and its issue in ASEAN member states. So that will be my third point. And then we would like to discuss about the challenges and opportunities. And we would like to conclude some takeaway points for my presentation before the other presentation that will present more detail in the ASEAN member states. And here, as the first slide, I would like to show you about the status for the electrification ratio up to 2017. As we know that in ASEAN itself, we have millions people, about 630 million people, and about 190 million people has no access in 2005. And it decreased into 107 million people in recent years. And then we have some development for the electrification. And as we could see until now, some of the ASEAN member states has achieved 100% electrification ratio. Like we could see in the presentation, we have Thailand, we have Singapore, and we have Brunei, which is 100%. But Brunei, it's about 99.9%. And then also some of the countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, also almost 100%. It's about 99%. And Indonesia following after in 95.35%. And Philippines 90.7%. And we could see also low PDR is 92, and some of the countries maybe still pursuing the electrification ratio, like Myanmar is 33%, and Cambodia is 65%. And as we know that the countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, and other countries who has not a 100% electrification ratio, they are still pursuing in their policy. Like we have shown in here, there are some targets for Myanmar, and so for Cambodia, they are pursuing about 100% in 2030, and for Cambodia, it's about 90% in 2030. And also for Indonesia, maybe we have some detailed information from Pak Haliuddin this afternoon. For Indonesia itself, we have the target that it will be 98% in 2019, and for Vietnam and Philippines in 2022 and 2022 for Philippines, and low PDR is about 2022. So we could say that all the ASEAN member states aims to achieve 100% electrification ratio or zero darkness before 2030. So that's quite interesting for all of us that all ASEAN member states pursuing this target with the great efforts. And then there are a lot of options to achieve the electrification, especially why the electrification is still low for the some countries, because there are a lot of rural area and there are a lot of remote islands for the archipelagic like Philippines and Indonesia. And we have some option to electrify the households in the remote island and the rural area. These are the options that we have: a standalone off-grid, and also the RE hybrid off-grid. Maybe you could hybrid with the RE with RE or RE with diesel, or so and so on. And then we have mini grid system with the storage system and many various sources for the energy. And also maybe some of the countries still using a diesel as the option for the electrification. And maybe for Indonesia, they have creatively created the marine vessel power plant, or using the gas to extend or to back up some islands like Sulawesi Island in Indonesia. That's the option for the electrification. And then talking about the option, we have seen so many off-grid as the option. And this is the status for the ASEAN off-grid electrification. So up to today, we have 98% off-grid generated by the diesel. And we have a number for Indonesia like 3 gigawatt, Philippines 300 megawatt, and also Myanmar about 100, and also Thailand maybe some in the small numbers. And also 4% is contributed by the renewable energy. And as we could see, this is the distribution of the off-grid. In the left, you could see that there are a lot of distribution for the RE. Like for Myanmar, there are a lot of off-grid micro hydro, and also Thailand with their solar PV, Vietnam with their wind, Indonesia with their solar PV, but some of the places with the micro hydro, and the others are following, like Philippines with the micro hydro as well. So this is the data that we have collected from 2013 until 2017 with the ASEAN member states. And then looking at the off-grid number in diesel, we have so many large number of diesel, and the eastern part of Indonesia is the grid consumer for that one. And we could see that in this map, diesel are used as the main fuels to generate the electricity. And as well in Philippines, we could see that 90% of the electricity generation from the Philippines for the off-grid in the Philippines are generated by diesel, and only 10% in RE. And then actually we have the problem with the diesel, like the reliability, sustainability, and affordability. And in the left table, I would like to show you that there are a lot of example in Philippines and in Myanmar. I take these cases. So if you see that in Philippines, it's only 6 until 8 hours, uh, almost mini grids just electrifying the household there, and only 24 hours mini grid only in 25 village. And then for the Myanmar, it's range from 1 hours per day until 3 hours per day, so it's not reliable. That we would like to develop in the future, maybe a grid quality mini grid. So it's about 24 hours with the high reliability. And then if we go with the affordability, as you know, uh, diesel also has some expensive cost for the transportation. If we compare the true cost of diesel per pesos in Philippines, we see so many different number here, but the biggest one is 21 pesos, or maybe it's about quadruple numbers of the real effective selling rate of the electricity itself. The problem is the other problem that we have in Philippines is like the government shall spend about 10 billion pesos just only to supply the fuel and transportation costs for the off-grid demand, and it will require huge subsidies to disburse the fuel and transport costs for the off-grid demand. So that's the affordability problem that we have if we use the diesel. And then we have some many best practice for the renewable energy financing, especially renewable energy is still high in ASEAN countries, but there's a lot of activities from the private and so the government to cover with the creative business model. And we have seen some subsidy for the connection in Cambodia has been disbursed, and so the business model rent to own program for the rural electrification also implemented in Lao PDR and Cambodia, Power to the Poor, also CSR program, especially for Indonesia in Liran Island, the border islands with the Timor. PLN just disbursed some money through their CSR program to electrify the households there. And then we have like some advanced modeling, like advanced business model, like collective tariff by prepaid meter in Myanmar, and also by technician in Thailand. And also Philippines established the Renewable Energy Financing Corporation, which helps the electrification financing, and so the privates who helps the governments in there. And we have identified there are several sources that we have to install the off-grid, especially for financing, like private grants, ODA, official development assistance, or preferential loans. And then we have national funds, like in some countries. And then the other issue is the sustainability. We have the study with the IRENA that we have identified the emission because of the, I mean, in energy sector. We could see that the power is the huge contributor for the emission in the energy sector, and the oil is the second one after coal. So we could see if we use more diesel, it will not good for our environmental. And also remember that we have intended contribution for the 2 degrees Celsius and COP21 Paris Agreement. So maybe we should consider more about the using diesel in rural electrification. And also based on the reserve to production ratio in ASEAN, as we could see that the number of oil is the smaller one, is only 10 years. So that's a big issue for the sustainability of the rural electrification. And then we identified the opportunities for the off-grid and solar electrification, that rural electrification could be solved by many options. So we shall look for the advanced model in financing and technical methods, which enables a nation to achieve their target, especially for the electrification target. And abundant RE and new technology could be utilized. The ODA or grants will be the option for the financing. Commitment to increase RE share in the region will boost the RE in rural electrification. And also, hopefully, rapid technology development and lower price of RE will contribute in sustainability and affordability for the system. And there are some challenges that we should address in the near future, like high investment costs for the RE technologies, high dependency on the fossil fuels, the capability of developing RE technologies, and the lack of the system integration for the knowledge transfer, and financing support for RE is still lacking. And then no stringent target rule for the RE in off-grid electrification. And maybe to end this presentation, I would like to conclude that rural electrification is still the hot agenda for some nation in ASEAN member states, especially for the who are still pursuing the 100% target. And we believe that aiming the zero darkness in the region would be attractive enough for the developers and also for the nations. And then we could see that off-grid is still dominated by diesel. Fortunately, we could see this by from the positive perspective that diesel could be replaced by the renewable energy due to some commitments of the country in the Paris Agreement, which with the cleaner and sustainable energy. And we have some issue on the off-grid system about the reliability, sustainability, and affordability. These are the three keys to be addressed by the ASEAN member states in the future. And then we should support the RE and new technologies for the off-grid electrification. And by using more RE in the electrification, we believe nation will help in achieving regional target in 2030, 2025 to achieve 23% energy mix. So that's all about my presentation. Thank you very much. Maybe I could give the floor to Melati. Thank you, Melati.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Damar, for giving us a very comprehensive overview of the electrification status in ASEAN. So next, we're going straight to our next speaker, Mr. Alihuddin Sitompul. So I'm going to give the screen to you, and the floor is yours. Yes, Mr. Alihuddin, we are ready for your presentation. Good afternoon, Pak Alihuddin. Good afternoon, Pak Alihuddin. Yes. Hello, Pak Halihudin. I don't think we can hear your voice just yet. Yes, hello, Mr. Halihudin.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, today is today in this forum, I will present Indonesia's achievement in rural electrification. ACE recognized that Indonesia is a progressively achieved significant electrification ratio. Achievement is 95.35% on the realization compared to 92.75% target in 2017. Even Indonesia has achieved exceedingly the target since 2010. I'll show you this how it's done so far and the future program we have. Uh, Let me see how the legal foundation for the our effort to provide electricity. This is the legal foundation and regulation framework on Indonesian electricity development management. The point is how to optimize utilization of fossil fuel and renewable energy utilization. And then we can see in this figure how the electricity development goals as mandated by Electricity Law number 30 year 2009. Electricity shall provide in sufficient quantity, reliable quality, and most importantly, affordable by the peoples. And it is in line with President Jokowi mandate. So we can call that nawacita. It's all to realization of prosperous society that materially and spiritually equal. And then we can see how the Indonesian rural electrification program firstly we can see how the electrification ratio of Asian country, as Mr. Damal said before. This picture show how ASEAN shining in the dark compared to other parts of the world. And it is our challenge to electrify our people and our region. If we see, this is the comparison, I think this I can fast that because Mr. Gamal already saw this for you, but in this picture show how much challenges ASEAN is facing. we as ASEAN should reach zero darkness as soon as possible, expected before 2030. And then we can take to Indonesia, how the Indonesia electrification ratio. For your reference, this is the Indonesian electrification ratio by 2017 has reached 95.38%. And as mentioned before, that we have reached its ceiling target consecutively since 2010. But we still have challenges to electrifying eastern side of Indonesia, it's as Papua and Nusa Tenggara, due to less density and scattered population, wide area, and less physically infrastructure. And then how about the national rural electrification ratio in 2017? This is the picture 48,000 villages throughout Indonesia, the archipelago. We have electrifying 97.10% of them, and yet there are 2,300 something village is living in total darkness. So you can see how scattered they are in each province. And then how the progress rural electrification since 2015 until 2000, we compare with 2015 and 2017. We can see the picture show comparison on how 2015 and 2017 of rural electrification progress. In 2015, there are 2,519 unelectrified villages. You see in the red one, and they are living in total darkness. And within 2 years, we have electrified 137 villages, and we are about to electrify more 2,382 villages in coming 2 years. So how about increasing access in a rural area? You can see this is the way how Indonesia government increase electricity access in rural area. There are three categories and approach. First one is a grid extension. Is used to electrify villages that located close to electrified villages that already supplied by PLN. PLN is a state-owned enterprise. Second approach is a village with people living in the same place as a communal is electrified by the mini grid of grid. And third, village where the people living scattered is electrified by individual stand-alone, let's say a solar pump system. And then how about grid extension by PLN? Government tax PLN to electrify by the grid extension in 2017 with 1.75 trillion rupiah. It's in 2 trillion, it's a trillion rupiah transmission and distribution lines laid over 9,000 kilometers and installed transformer 176.42 megawatt ampere. And by 2018, PLN planned extending the grid with 6.70 trillion rupiah. Transmission and distribution lines laid over 13,500 kilometers and installed transformer 331 mega for ampere. So this many work in Indonesia. So how to accelerate of Indonesia rural electrification? Government, let's say, minister has issued the ministerial regulation number 38 year 2016. Government Indonesia also giving opportunity for investment based on regional government proposal or assignment to regional owned enterprise. This opportunity to electrify rural area or remote area or border area or small population in island by giving business area to provide maximum 50 megawatt integrated electricity for minimum one district. If you come to Indonesia, you can see that kecamatan, and it's regulated under the Ministry Regulation number 58 year 2016. This can also highlight renewable energy utilization and how solar PV and micro or mini hydro power plant development in Indonesia since 2011 until 2017 based on government budget. You can see this. Government also provide allocation through state budget to electrify rural area by developing solar PV and micro or mini hydro power plant development. You may see also its progress since 2011. And then how they illuminating from the edge. In this program, beyond the grid extension program, the government of Indonesia also has a program for free electrification since 2017 and roll over to 2018 by introducing solar energy saving lamp. You can see Indonesia lampu tenaga surya hemat energy if you call it in Indonesia. This only 2 years program is suitable as a pre-electrification program for house in village which are geographically and distribution of the people are scattered and it is difficult to cover by current PLN grids. This program is not considered to increase electrification. And then you can see how the implementation of solar energy saving land. You can see that our minister went to the village and to very safe, very isolated area. Visit the people house there and minister installed the solar energy saving lamp. You can see, you can call in Indonesia LTSI. And then this is the program electrification program since 2015 until 2017. This bar chart shows the summary progress of rural electrification. And then rural electrification development plan by the PLN. This table shows a glance of PLN 10 years planning program on grid extension for rural electrification as mentioned in Indonesia we call as UPTR. PLN, General Planning for Electrification.
For 10 years.
For 10 years. And then how you can see here how our effort to provide electricity for the rural, remote, and isolated area. This picture, you can see this, we can use something, sometime we catalytic, cow or buffalo maybe. And then we can use a peaceful effort to pull the pole something, and we must sing the river. And then we can see also here how our people condition. So this is our effort. This is our effort to provide that. So, and then we cannot discuss based on business. It's, okay, I think that's all. Thank you for your. That's all how government of Indonesia fought to electrify people throughout Indonesia archipelago, and we hope we could achieve that 100% electrification target ratio before 20, 2020, not 2025, but 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alihuddin, for the updates on how Indonesia is tackling the electrification ratio issues, these current issues, and hopefully in 2020 you can already achieve the target. And we're going straight to our next speaker, to Mr. David Allen. So the time is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much to everybody for the opportunity to participate in this. Can I check? That's okay. So my topic is women in electrification, and talking a little about needs analysis, gender analysis, and renewable energy. Now, Myanmar has had a vast number of electricity access issues, and this has been a very big issue over many years. So you've seen numbers from previous presentations that are showing that electricity access is something like 33% from the grid at present. But we need to recognise that actually there's other ways of getting electricity access, not just the grid. There's also been very big concerns about how the electricity is supplied, and this 2011 newspaper shot gives you a picture of presidential suspension of a 6,000 megawatt hydro project that was mostly for export, that is considered to cause many issues, and recent assessments on looking at economic, environmental and social issues presents a lot of concerns for the hydropower industry, and particularly for main stem dams in the Myanmar situation. So how the electricity is generated is a very big concern to the people in Myanmar as well, even though access to service is not that high at present. I wanted to give a very quick overview of Myanmar's overall energy balance. And this is a Sankey diagram that shows the energy flows roughly in scale. So you can see two very large paths there, pathways. One is the lower one on the left. The green is gas export, which is gas exported to Thailand for Thailand's energy needs. The browny orange bar is the use of biomass in the country. And a lot of the other much smaller bars give you a picture of electricity and other energy uses in the country. Now, if you segregate that even further and look at the energy use for one of the key themes of this webinar, for lighting and for eradicating darkness, actually the line will be incredibly small in terms of the amount of energy used to provide the key need of lighting. So the energy balance is important. Looking at where the energy is going currently is important, but also looking at where might future energy come from to meet specific needs. And lighting is one we're particularly focused on. This is some analysis that the Spectrum team has done looking at the 2014 census results. And it gives a map of graphs and usage information in across the country, broken down by every township in 8 categories, looking at 7 for lighting use, and then we also put in mobile phone ownership as well. So we segregated this on the basis of looking at on-grid electrification, use of generators, use of solar PV, use of small hydro, use of kerosene, use of candles, use of batteries, and mobile phone ownership. Mobile phone ownership is important because this is a service that people very much want. So it acts a little bit as a litmus test of, well, where are people going to pay for some means of getting service access when they really want it? And it's probably a much better picture of people's desire for a service need than any of the projections that might look at, well, do people want grid in this area? Because many questions of affordability come into that. So if you look at some of these graphs, and particularly the one for solar PV in the top middle right, this shows that actually the solar PV in Shan State, the incidence of this is very, very high in some instances. If you look at the graph below that, in the dry zone in the central area of Myanmar, you can see that systems set up using batteries are very, very high incidence. And this also coincides with the sunny areas of Myanmar. And so actually it gives you a picture of, well, there's a huge potential for solar work in this area because people are already managing to operate battery systems quite well. Top right shows you again in Shan and Chin State, very high usage of small hydro. And yet bottom mid left shows you that still people are using candles in many different places across the country. So this raises a very large number of questions. And of course, top left gives you a picture of the current electrification via the grid at this point in time. So one of the points I want to make here is that the theme of zero darkness and 100% electrification, actually they're not the same and they're not talking about the same things. There are many ways for people to get light for the services they need, and it doesn't necessarily have to be grid supply. There can be other opportunities. And then the really big questions that other speakers have been talking about, like reliability, sustainability, and affordability, become really key issues for us to be considering as part of this question of access to service. So I just wanted to draw out some of the amazing things that we found when we did this study, a study of census information. And bear in mind, this is 2014 census information, but we really only got good access to it in 2016, 2017. And so this shows that in one whole state, 36% of all lighting being used was in 2014 solar. It doesn't give a picture of things like, well, what's the quality of those systems and how long will the life of those systems will be. But it also highlights that in some places, a similar number, 36% of people are still using candles. And so we're trying to get an understanding of, well, why is that and why are they struggling with access? But overall in the country, currently, the figures, or rather in 2014, the figures were 11.5% being supplied by solar, 21% being supplied by battery-based systems. Additional to the energy considerations are that energy is not just electricity, and in Myanmar, 80% of the national energy use is actually being used for cooking. There still isn't a national cooking strategy. Some aspects are being worked on in terms of improving the sustainability of biomass systems in the future, but in present, if you look at rural cooking needs, you know, you've got something in excess of 90% of rural cooking is being supplied by biomass, and even over 50% of urban cooking is being supplied by biomass. So just thinking about electrification has to include other sectors as well. And I show this slide just to show one of the number of factors that's really having a very big impact. And so the very rapid price reduction for solar and household solar systems, and also grid type solar systems, is substantially changing the opportunities that we have available to us. So this is new technology. Also new technology is the equipment and technology available to actually provide the light, so that LED systems can provide light as a service in a very different way, and with a very different electricity requirement, and with a very different efficiency level to what was required in the past. Well, I've skipped a slide there. And one of the pieces of large study work that we did in the country was together with WWF, Renewable Energy Association of Myanmar, and Intelligent Energy Systems, was doing a study looking at, well, what's the feasibility of having 100% renewables supplied in Myanmar by 2050, and came to the conclusion that it's possible. So there are many changes possible in the system, and with the current low electrification and low energy supply rate, Myanmar's relatively well positioned with not having to decommission too many coal assets, etc., to be renewable for the future. And now getting on to my second theme, which is, well, what role does gender play in this overall situation of energy, and why do you need to think about gender in renewable energy? And so for this, I come to looking at the question of, well, what's a basis for meeting people's needs? In Myanmar, women are nearly 52% of the population. How well do we know their needs? This graph also shows the proposed rollout time in different ethnic areas, and I'll also say we need to understand ethnic people's needs and whether they're going to be satisfied with getting electricity only very late in the rollout system, and I think we can be sure that they won't be happy with that. So coming back to gender, so some of the key questions are, well, what's the extent of gender understanding of decision makers in Myanmar, and how well can decisions be made for the majority of the population without this understanding? And I'd pass on some comments from, typical comments from very high-level officials at times, and they have quite a difficult view to overcome. And so I hear this question so much: how can women's needs for electricity be any different to those of men? And I want to convince you that actually the needs are very different, and you probably should listen more to the needs that women refer to than the needs of men. Recently, we've been doing quite a bit of demographic study of Myanmar. These are some graphs in 3 states and regions. Actually, these are areas where states and regions where GIZ has projects, and it looks at the difference of the labour force participation rate. And you can see that the male labour participation on the left is vastly different to the female on the right. Now, some of this is very poorly explained yet, but there's also enough evidence, I think, that energy is at least a portion of this, and that the fact that energy is not available for meeting women's household tasks means that it's harder for them to be available for the labour force. Coming back to some overall work that we've done looking at people-centred energy policy a few years ago, we really came to the conclusion that if you're going to have a successful strategy for energy, you need to segregate it differently to how people have been thinking about it in the past. So just thinking about supplying grid doesn't give you the response or the opportunity for a strategy that's going to work. So we came to the conclusion you have to consider rural, have to consider urban separately, have to consider specific industrial strategies because of the increased reliability needs, and you have to consider a national cooking strategy. And my further argument is, well, then you have to consider the gender aspects separately for all of those categories, but particularly rural, urban, and cooking. So to study this better in some areas, and we particularly focused on the rural population because 70% of Myanmar's population is rural. We studied Kachin State in the north and Cayenne State in the southeast. And when we came to the information that came out is that what women want electricity for is predominantly for lighting, for children's education needs, for care for children, care for the elderly, care for the sick, and for providing safety for the community. We heard that they wish to provide, that they wish for communications energy, and phone charging is a really critical thing, and that extending working hours through whatever business enterprise or process they're involved in is very important as well. Now, most of those, particularly lighting and communication, but many of the business forms in Myanmar that just need light to be able to run a trading business or to have extra operating hours, they actually need very low order of electricity. So again, it comes back to the renewables and the low energy lighting opportunities provide technology that dramatically changes how planning might be done for meeting people's service needs. And so women's needs are actually defined very differently to men. And so when you talk to them, men will frequently talk about wanting energy for business. Many of their businesses actually fail. And so it's not a particularly reliable way to plan your energy needs based on businesses that have problems with getting products to market, problems with other services, problems with supply chain. And actually, many of men's needs are actually wants for entertainment and for TVs, etc. So what you actually have in the planning system is that you have a system being designed not for the very pressing human needs of lighting, communications and work, but for things that fit more with esteem or for entertainment or for dreams. So some of the difficulties with that is, well, actually men end up having much more influence in project prioritisation factors, and so they tend to suggest that centralised grid options rather than decentralised options are what's needed. But actually, if you talk about services, women are much more focused on receiving the service for what they might want, and that's important. We also uncovered in this research that energy is perceived very much as a male area, and women are considered not to know much about how to work safely with electricity. That's okay, but it would help if you can bridge that gap, and so if women know what they need to know. But actually women seemed much more focused on, well, what's the end use service and what are my needs, rather than the men. So some recommendations in this area are that energy literacy work needs an overhaul, full stop. Secondly, you really need to be doing disaggregated needs assessment and to be doing a detailed understanding of what roles need what type of energy. I think we need to improve the options availability and the gender considerations. And we've also in Myanmar particularly got a major issue of affordability. So people can't afford to connect to the grid at this point in time until the economy improves a little more. So we've got this major issue of affordability of connection becomes a really key issue, and the affordability of different options, particularly grid options, are vastly different from solar home systems. So I suggest that we need to focus energy planning much more on people's immediate needs and their long-term needs, while thinking about how some of the options can be developed further to allow better economic growth. And we have some study underway on women and productive use of energy to hopefully move that forward. And so I use this as a summary slide. I think in the last couple of years, thinking about the Myanmar system, we've got a lot of new information. We've got a lot of new perceptions on the importance of this information. We've got new realities with new technology of solar and solar lighting type systems and efficient LED lighting systems. And so we need a different type of analysis. And so just to wrap things up, overall, thinking about the topic of gender and renewable energy, we need to consider all people's needs, not just male needs and not just decision makers' needs. We need to disaggregate all data. We need to do some quite careful study of the demographics because it has very big impact on affordability issues. We need to consider separating policy and planning into appropriate areas. Rural and urban needs are very different. Industrial needs are also very different to rural and urban needs. Cooking strategy is probably a big black hole in terms of how little work is done in improving the overall focus on cooking energy strategy at present. In Myanmar as well, we need to remove some of the obstacles for progressing energy systems, and some of those are things like the fact that so much energy is subsidised at present. The state loses a lot of money on electricity sales. Because people get such poor quality service at present, they don't want to pay any more for it. So you end up with a chicken and egg situation in moving forward. So suggestion is that, well, if you focus on improving quality of service, but service for what people actually need, well, then people will pay for it. If you can make the situation such that people are prepared to pay for their energy and the subsidy system is removed, well, then the investment climate will be ready to invest in projects like that. I want to say that projects should also focus on doing no harm, and the recent sustainable environmental assessment process for hydropower in Myanmar has been really fantastic in helping the country understand that of the 100+ projects under consideration, which could proceed with relatively low impact and which ones should not proceed because the impacts are just going to be too high. Then I guess other things we can say is that many solutions are close at hand. So you just need to look at Shan State in Myanmar to see people are helping themselves and they're setting their own systems up. So what extra help might they need to be able to do a little bit more of that? Gendered demand thinking is critical in overall system design, and if there's one message for energy planners, I think is think much more about needs of what people are going to use electricity for. Think particularly about gendered needs because women's focus on service is very strong and it's very linked to their personal interest. And I guess the last message that we showed is that renewables is doable, and that if you can consider gender, renewable issues, then some of these questions of how do we provide access to services, how do we improve reliability, how do we address sustainability, and how do we make electricity affordable, well, then actually the results for people not being in the dark and being able to progress an appropriate energy use strategy, some of which will involve electrification, will work out quite well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Alan, and for reminding us about the importance of people-centered approach as well in achieving this and delivering this access to electricity for the people. Yes, for the last one section, we have Ms. Atik Puspa Fadila from GIZ to to convey your view from GIZ. So, Ms. Atik, the floor
Hello,
is.
good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello. Yeah, so after seeing the presentation from all of the presenters, I think it's making a good view of how ASEAN Energy has achieved and should look forward. I think my time is not really long as well, so I want to only add on. GIZ is actually working on how to increase the reliability and the sustainability of the system that has been built by the government of Indonesia, especially in rural electrification. More focus on the off-grid area, so it's not in the grid extension, it's not in a solar home system, but it's on the mini grids, because as you all already see in the Pak Alihuddin presentation, that there are 626, I think now it's more than that, combining from all many different ministries. I think it's probably has reached almost 1,000 mini grids, both from MHP and both from micro hydropower and also from the solar mini grid. And I think one of the learning from the micro hydropower role in the rural electrification in Indonesia, there are some key structures that are not yet available in Indonesia for solar mini grids, because considering the new technology, the complexity, and it's much different from the micro hydropower. To increase the reliability and the sustainability, there are many aspects that we need to consider when doing planning and also execution on the rural electrification. First is the planning. Sometimes when we deploy the rural electrification, sometimes like I think what Mr. David addressed with the consider gender perspective on demand planning, it's really on point, because sometimes with the government project or even with CSR program as well, or any projects, sometimes the demand planning is not really considered as a very critical role, but actually in the end it will really affect the sustainability of the system, because on our recent study, when we miscalculate the demand of the electricity, and when the system is already built, the villagers does not really know how to do with the electricity. So sometimes it left the system with energy curtailment and also oversizing the system, etc. So it's in the planning, and then also to maintain the reliability and the sustainability of the rural electrification. We must remember that sometimes, especially for Indonesia, we have to electrify the remaining 10 to almost 10% of the unelectrified area that is really remote. I mean, those pictures that is presented by the Minister of SDM is quite representative, but there are more location that is more difficult and more challenging with the oceans as well. So the service structure that the villagers to where they can access the technical assistance on the system is also critical, because often the system is already there, so our home system, and then the mini grids, but sometimes not sometimes, often it's really hard to access the service structure. So when we deploy a system, we prepare the ecosystem in the area. I mean, like not only the operator, but also who are the competent technicians that can be accessed by the villagers. I think it's also worth to be addressed in this discussion, especially for decentralized rural electrification. Like for the grid, probably it can be tackled by the company, but often for the remaining 10 to 0% of area which is not electrified, that's a different game. I mean, it's really hard for them to get access to almost anything. So yeah, I think that's our point from the GIZ point of view. And learning from MHP, their service structure can be available in the course in the area of village level sometimes, because of the complexity of the technology is not as complex as the PV mini grids or solar mini grids. So that makes micro hydropower is quite reliable and robust in the rural setup, because almost everyone in the vocational students can try to fix this system. But for PV solar mini grid, if you want to deploy a system in the rural electrification, keep in mind that after this is installed, who will take care of the system in the more troubleshooting manners, like how to troubleshoot the system during their operation kind of thing. So I think that's we want to add in this discussion. If it's hello, Bulan?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Atik, for the perspective from GIZ. And actually, due to our time constraint, we only have time for one more question from one of our attendees. There's a question. So, this is from one of our attendees that they said that it is very interesting that Mr. Arlands pointed that zero darkness and 100% electrification is not the same thing. And do you think, what are the priority that the government should address first when it comes to priority? When it comes to rural electrification, is it social challenges first, or technical challenges first, or the economic challenges, and how to tackle, like, and to prioritize these challenges? Maybe from Mr. Alan or Miss Atik can want to say a word about this. Yes.
Yes, I'm very happy to comment on that, and thanks for that question. I think particularly in rural areas, I guess our recent research really shows that lighting is the biggest priority by far, and I think there perhaps needs to be a lot more focus at present recognising what can be done right now very quickly, and in fact quite affordably to help improve people's service needs through smaller systems, so that's either solar home systems or grid systems in rural areas through solar and through highly efficient LED lighting systems. And one of the key things that you need to be addressing in this is the issue of reliability for the longer term. That leads to questions of overall affordability. So what you want government to involve in is not trying to say, well, the grid has to go into this area, but in ensuring that there are appropriate standards on the quality of new technologies that are brought in, on the qualities of solar panels, for example, ensuring that the tax, import tax and customs duties, etc., on such commercial supplies can in fact support the public to pay for their own way forward. Then in addition to that, you need mechanisms that give the public access to affordable finance, so not so that they're having to find $800 on average to connect to the grid, and then that they won't be able to pay for the electricity needs, but that they can pay a modest amount based on the fact that they're getting access to a lighting system that provides their service needs, and they'll be happy to pay for it. So I think these are quite easy things to prioritise, but they just don't tend to have been prioritised because system planners tend to be thinking much more about grid extension, doing the national grid extension by a least cost route, and looking at construction of infrastructure like where will the next generation plant be. And I think an improved focus on needs will help improve the rate of service provision, because most of the generation structure issues are going to be very long and very slow. So they're needed in some areas, but actually they're not going to offer the solutions required for most rural people. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you very much, Mr. David, for your answers and comments for that. And so it came to our end of discussion. I can catch a few key important points that we have discussed today. And one of the main issues on the off-grid systems are their reliability, sustainability, and affordability. And renewable energy is seen as one of the most effective solution in achieving 100% electrification ratio as implemented in the Rural Electrification Acceleration Program in Indonesia. And also, we highlight the importance of demand and people needs to be as the center approach in planning the development of rural electrification. And yes, I would like to thank you to the attendees for joining this webinar session, and apologize for the for that this is running a bit later than the schedule. And thank you as well to all the speakers and panelists for sharing their knowledge. And for Palihudin as well, on behalf of ACE, thank you for all your support as alternate soil leaders for Indonesia. And don't forget that this webinar is a monthly event, so we're going to have the next one on March. And so good afternoon to all, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.